Have you ever looked at your cat and thought, seriously, pal, are you actually doing anything useful besides napping 18 hours a day? But what if I told you that their distant ancestors literally decided the fate of empires? That one fluffy saboteur cost American intelligence $20 million? Or that without one specific cat, we might still be sitting here without electricity? Hey there, everyone. Today we're going to completely flip your view of history. Forget the boring textbooks. We're talking about humanity's true grey cardinals, 20 cats that influence politics, advance science, and save thousands of lives. Get ready. Some of these facts sound like crazy fiction, but they are absolutely 100% true. Let's dive in. But before we get to these specific four-legged heroes, let's rewind for a second. The relationship between humans and cats has been a real roller coaster. In ancient Egypt, they were considered the earthly embodiments of gods. Killing a cat, even accidentally, was punishable by death. Seriously, no lawyer could save you. However, in medieval Europe, the situation changed drastically. Cats were declared associates of the devil, or dark forces. This, by the way, severely backfired on humanity itself. But we'll get to that a little later. For centuries, these animals have been right alongside great scientists, military leaders, and presidents. They walked across tables where peace treaties were signed and slept on blueprints that changed the world. And often, their intervention, whether accidental or deliberate, became that critical grain of sand that tipped the scales of history. Let's start with a moment when the deep reverence for cats proved to be a civilization's spectacular undoing. We need to flash back to 525 BC, the Battle of Pelusium, pitting the Egyptians against the Persians. The Persian king, Cambyses II, knew the Egyptians revered the goddess Bastet, often depicted with the head of a cat, and what he devised was arguably the most cynical psychological tactic in military history. Legend has it that the Persian warriors didn't stop at merely painting images of cats on their shields. Some sources claim they literally carried live cats in front of them as they charged the Egyptian lines. Picture the scene. The Egyptian archers, the finest sharpshooters of their time, simply lowered their bows. They feared hitting a sacred animal, believing it was better to lose the battle and face enslavement than to offend a deity and forfeit eternal life. The Persians captured the city, virtually without a fight, and so an intense, almost religious devotion to felines led directly to the downfall of the great Egyptian kingdom. Cruel? Absolutely. Effective? Undeniably so. Let's jump straight back to the 7th century CE. This is the story of Muezza, the cat of the Prophet Muhammad. This is more than just a sweet anecdote. It's a pivotal moment that defined the status of cats throughout the Islamic world for centuries to come. The tradition goes that one day the Prophet was preparing for prayer when he noticed Muezza sleeping soundly on the sleeve of his prayer robe. What would most people do? They would simply shoo the animal away. But Muhammad, unwilling to disturb his beloved companion's rest, took a pair of scissors and cut the sleeve clean off his garment. He attended his prayers in the now damaged robe, prioritizing the cat's comfort over his attire. This single act cemented a revered status for cats within Islam. Unlike dogs, which were often considered ritually unclean at the time, cats were specifically permitted inside mosques. Even today, if you visit cities like Istanbul or Cairo, you will witness thousands of stray cats being openly fed, cared for, and respected by the local population, all thanks to one small piece of fabric, snipped off thousands of years ago. But cats weren't always so lucky. Let's travel back to the 13th century, the darker times of medieval Europe. Pope Gregory IX issued a papal bull, known as Vox, in Rama. In this document, black cats were declared to be nothing less than instruments of the devil himself. Mass hysteria erupted. Cats were systematically exterminated by the thousands. They were burned, drowned, and annihilated. People truly believed they were cleansing the world of evil, but nature exacted a terrible revenge for this disruption of the natural balance. With the cats gone, the rat population multiplied unchecked, and on those rats lived the fleas that carried the plague bacterium. By the middle of the 14th century, the Black Death wiped out, by some estimates, up to 60% of Europe's entire population. The cruel irony, by eliminating their own furry protectors, humanity essentially opened the gates to the deadliest pandemic in medieval history. If Pope Gregory had simply been a cat lover, the history of Europe might have taken a completely different course. Let's talk a little bit about science. Isaac Newton, the great physicist, discoverer of gravity, the whole deal. But did you know he's credited with another invention used by millions of people? The cat flap. Yep, that famous little hole in the door. The story goes that when Newton was working on his light experiments in Cambridge, his cat kept scratching at the door, letting in light and messing up his instrument settings. To avoid having to get up and open it for her, he simply sawed a hole in the door. But the funniest bit isn't even that. When the cat had kittens, the great genius Newton, legend has it, sawed several more small holes right next to the original one, just for the babies. It just didn't occur to him that the kittens could use the exact same hole as their mother. See? Even the greatest minds sometimes have a complete brain fog when it comes to domestic life and their furry neighbours. Let me tell you an incredible story about the accidental discovery of a chemical element. The year was 1811. French chemist Bernard Courtois was working in his laboratory, desperately trying to produce saltpeter for gunpowder. The Napoleonic Wars were raging, and they needed powder fast. Courtois had a beloved cat, who often perched on his shoulder, especially around mealtime. The lab contained two critical containers. One held an alcoholic extract made from seaweed ash, and the other contained sulfuric acid. At that moment, the cat got startled, jumped down, and knocked over both bottles. The two liquids instantly mixed, and the laboratory was suddenly engulfed in thick, dramatic clouds of violet vapour. When the fumes finally cleared, Courtois noticed shimmering, metallic-looking crystals. That was the discovery of iodine. This essential element, found in every modern first aid kit, saving millions of lives from infection, was all thanks to one clumsy but incredibly helpful cat, Nikola Tesla, the genius who fundamentally changed our world with AC power. But where did his lifelong fascination with electricity actually begin? In the letter he wrote much later, addressed to the daughter of the Yugoslav ambassador, Tesla shared a vivid story from his early childhood. He was only 3 at the time. It was a dry, cold evening, and he was petting his beloved black cat, Mashak. Suddenly he noticed his hand was surrounded by a strange glow in the darkness, and sparks were flying visibly from Mashak's fur. The sharp crackle of static electricity filled the entire room. His father explained that this phenomenon was exactly the same force that caused lightning in the sky. Little Nikola was stunned. He stared at his cat, and a profound question crossed his mind. Does this mean nature itself is just a giant cat? That childhood impression, those sparks on Mashak's fur, ignited the imagination of the genius who would later illuminate the entire planet. Now, a quick look at the wars of the 20th century. The First World War. Trench warfare defined by mud, rats and gas. Many nations officially adopted cats into their armed services. Their primary duty was ratting, controlling the vermin that chewed through rations and spread disease. But they served another, arguably more vital function, as gas detectors. Cats can sense the odour of gas significantly earlier than humans, and even faster than the traditional early warning canaries. A famous story tells of a trench cat named Pitt. One day, Pitt suddenly began acting strangely, hissing fiercely and frantically pawing at the earth. The soldiers immediately recognised the warning signs and managed to pull on their masks mere seconds before a cloud of mustard gas engulfed their position. This unassuming cat saved an entire platoon simply by doing what came naturally. World War II gave rise to the legend of Unsinkable Sam. This was a black and white cat who seemed to have made a pact with death itself. His service began aboard the German battleship, the Bismarck. When the British sank the Bismarck, only a handful of the 2,000-man crew survived. Among them was our cat, rescued by the British destroyer HMS Cossack. They renamed the cat Oscar. Just a few months later, a German torpedo ripped the Cossack in two, and the cat survived again. He was subsequently transferred to the mighty aircraft carrier, HMS Ark Royal. Think that's the end of the story? Not even close. The Ark Royal was torpedoed as well, and it went down. Sam was found floating on a piece of debris, soaked, furious, but perfectly alive. At that point, the sailors decided they had tempted fate enough and permanently retired the cat to shore duty. He eventually died of natural causes in Belfast, having successfully outlived 3 of the most powerful warships of the war. Let's talk about another hero of the high seas, Simon the cat. The year was 1949, during the infamous Yangtze incident. The British sloop, HMS Amethyst, came under heavy fire from Chinese shore batteries. The ship was severely damaged and grounded on a sandbank. It was sweltering hot, surrounded by casualties, and perhaps worst of all, overrun by massive hordes of rats devouring the crew's meagre food supplies. Simon the cat himself suffered shrapnel wounds. Medics removed the fragments, believing there was no chance he would pull through. But Simon didn't just survive. He returned immediately to his duties. Limping heavily, he systematically hunted down every single rat on the vessel, effectively saving the starving crew from disease and famine. Furthermore, he spent time every day visiting the wounded sailors, dramatically boosting their morale. Simon remains the only cat in history to be awarded the Dickin Medal, the highest military honour for animals, often referred to as the animal equivalent of the Victoria Cross. Let's talk about the Siege of Leningrad. This remains one of the most tragic yet heroic chapters in history. During the first and harshest winter, 1941 to 1942, almost every animal in the city was consumed. Consequently, Leningrad was completely overrun by rats. They were huge, aggressive, attacking sleeping residents, devouring the last crumbs of bread, and perhaps most terrifyingly, threatening the priceless collections of the Hermitage Museum. As soon as the blockade was partially broken, the first things sent into the city were not just food, but 4 train cars packed with cats from Yaroslavl and Tyumen. This operation came to be known as the Meowing Division. 5,000 cats were essentially deployed into the city. Eyewitnesses recalled seeing people weep with joy just at the sight of ordinary cats on the streets. They quickly cleared the city and its museums of rodents. To this day, the descendants of those feline heroes live in the Hermitage. They even have official passports and the status of museum employees. Space. We all know the famous Soviet space dogs Belka and Strelka. But who remembers Felicette? She was the first, and so far, the only cat to have ever travelled to space and returned alive. This happened in France back in 1963. The French were eager to join the space race, and as part of their programme, they selected 14 female cats and put them through rigorous centrifuge training. The winning candidate was a sleek black and white female cat from the streets of Paris, initially known only as C341, and later affectionately dubbed Felicette. The Veronique rocket launched her to an altitude of 157 kilometres. She endured intense G-forces and experienced periods of weightlessness before her capsule successfully parachuted back to Earth. Sadly, her story ended on a sombre note. A few months later, scientists euthanized her so they could examine her brain, a tragic but common scientific protocol of the time. Felicette was largely forgotten for nearly half a century. It wasn't until recently that space enthusiasts successfully raised funds to erect a proper monument to this brave astro cat. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about espionage, specifically the Cold War, the CIA, and Project Acoustic Kitty. Back in the 1960s, American intelligence concluded that cats made the perfect spies. They could wander anywhere they pleased without attracting suspicion. The actual plan was insane. They would surgically implant a microphone deep inside the cat's ear canal, thread a wire along its spine, and sew a radio transmitter antenna right into its tail. The operation took hours. When adjusted for inflation, this project supposedly consumed between 15 and 20 million. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The first field test. The cat was released from a surveillance van and tasked with approaching a park bench where 2 targets were seated. The operative cat took a few tentative steps, immediately got distracted, wandered right into the street, and was instantly struck by a passing taxi. the project was immediately scrapped. To this day, Acoustic Kitty is often cited as the most expensive and most disastrous animal espionage experiment in the history of modern intelligence. How about forensics? Meet Snowball the cat. The year is 1994 in Canada. A woman goes missing. Police find her jacket in the woods, along with bloodstains and a few white hairs. The blood belonged to the victim, but the hairs, they looked like they came from a cat. The prime suspect, the victim's ex-husband, owned a white cat named Snowball. Police decided to take an unprecedented step. DNA, test the cat. This had never been done in court before. Scientists literally had to develop the genetic fingerprinting methodology for animals from scratch. And it worked. The DNA from the hairs found on the jacket matched Snowball's DNA. This was the first time in global history that cat hair served as the main evidence in a murder case. Since then, a database of feline DNA has been established to aid police investigations. Let's talk about another unique crime fighter, Fred the cat. Back in 2006, New York City police were trying to bust a fraudulent veterinarian who was operating without a license. They needed a plant, specifically a decoy patient. A regular human undercover officer wouldn't do the trick. They needed someone who actually had a tail. That someone turned out to be Fred, a stray cat who had been rescued and rehabilitated by the district attorney's office employees. Fred was given a quick makeover and a cover story was prepped. A detective then carried him into the appointment. The fraudulent vet examined the cat and critically provided a false diagnosis. That was all the evidence the police needed for an immediate arrest. Fred officially became an undercover police agent, received his own detective badge, and even appeared at the subsequent press conference. Sadly, his career was short-lived, but he definitely proved that you don't need thumbs to serve and protect. Let's turn our attention to politics. Have you ever heard of Mayor Stubbs? Back in 1997, the residents of Talkeetna, Alaska, were so fed up with their local politicians that they wrote a candidate's name onto the ballot. Stubbs, a tiny ginger kitten. And he won. What started as a joke quickly became reality. Stubbs was declared the town's honorary mayor and held the office for 20 years. Though he had no real legislative power, many say he did more for the community than any human could. Tourism skyrocketed. Everyone wanted to meet the mayor, who often drank catnip-infused water from a wine glass at the local general store. Stubbs even survived an assassination attempt. He was attacked by a dog, but quickly returned to his mayoral duties. His story stands as a compelling example of how a cat became a powerful symbol of protest against the corruption and inefficiency of human government. The UK has an official position, the Chief Mouser to the Cabinet Office. Cats have been fixtures at 10 Downing Street for over 100 years. The most famous of the 20th century was Humphrey. He served under Margaret Thatcher, John Major, and Tony Blair. Rumour has it he was controversially retired because Cherie Blair, Tony Blair's wife, disliked cats, a move that sparked a huge media scandal. But today, the reigning mouser is Larry. He has already outlasted 5 prime ministers: Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss, Sunak. They all come and go, but Larry remains. He has become a symbol of stability in turbulent British politics. Journalists often joke that Larry is the only one in the building who actually gets any work done, even though he's usually spotted sleeping on the doorstep, right in front of the crowd of photographers. The economic miracle created by a cat. Kishi Station, Japan. This was a heavily loss-making railway branch line that was scheduled for closure. The station was deserted, and its only resident was a calico cat named Tama. In 2007, the railway management decided to appoint Tama as the official station master. They even had a tiny uniform cap, specially made for her. And that's when the miracle occurred. Pictures of the feline station chief went instantly viral. Tourists started flocking in massive numbers. Special cat-themed trains were launched. Tama single-handedly saved the company from bankruptcy. Economists estimate that during her time on the job, this one cat generated more than $10 million for the regional economy. In Japan, a new term was even coined: neconomics, the economic effect generated purely by cute cats. Oscar the cat and the science of dying. Deep within a nursing home in Providence, Rhode Island, lived a cat named Oscar who possessed a truly unsettling gift. Oscar could flawlessly predict which patients were nearing the end of their lives. His routine was unmistakable. He would enter the room, curl into a tight ball on the patient's bed, and stay there until their final breath. The medical staff quickly noticed the pattern. If Oscar settled beside a patient, they knew time was measured in mere hours. He accurately predicted over 50 deaths, often proving more reliable than the nurses or doctors themselves. Scientists theorized that he was detecting specific pheromones released by the body during the dying process. But Oscar was not a sinister harbinger of death. Rather, he was a deeply needed comforter. For many lonely and isolated individuals, his gentle purr became the last, kind sound they ever heard in this world. And of course, we can't talk about internet culture without mentioning the cats that changed everything. Take Grumpy Cat, for instance. Her real name was Tartar Sauce. Her perpetually disgruntled expression, the result of a natural underbite, became the defining symbol of an entire generation of memes. She surfaced in 2012 and rapidly developed into a massive commercial empire. We're talking books, movies, and massive merchandising deals. Grumpy Cat reportedly earned her owners nearly $100 million. She proved that a meme is far more than just a funny picture. It's a powerful cultural and economic force. In essence, cats built the blueprint for the modern social internet. They gave us a universal language of emotion, understood instantly anywhere in the world, no translation needed. And finally, a story about Tibbs the cat. Back in 1950s London, he was officially employed by the Royal Mail. He had a legitimate salary, which naturally went toward his food, and even an official employment record. Weighing a hefty 10 kilograms, Tibbs was the undisputed terror of the post office sellers. But that's not why he went down in history. His obituary, which was published in all the major newspapers, famously declared, "Tibbs maintained order where humans failed to do so." He became a true symbol of the feline working class, a simple, dedicated labourer who performed his duties flawlessly. It's stories like these that remind us that greatness doesn't always have to be tied to war or politics. Sometimes all it takes is catching mice well and being fiercely dedicated to your job. Such is the nature of the fuzzy masters of the world. From Egyptian deities to viral internet memes, from the trenches of World War I to the plush chairs in the Prime Minister's office, cats have been with us through every defining moment in history. They inspired discovery, saved us from disease, offered comfort during the darkest times, and sometimes they simply made us laugh. While you were watching this video, perhaps your cat was plotting something equally grand, or maybe just decided it was time for dinner. Either way, regard them with respect. Who knows, perhaps your cat will be the next one written into the history books. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to hit the like button. It's the best reward for us and our feline friends. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next investigation. Now for a question for you. Which story surprised you the most? The spy cat or the space cat? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.